I think it's funny that the things that you're talking about there are just how business is done nowadays, and those are relics of the past. Where when you say, "I don't have billable hours in the day to do that kind of work," to do the kind of work that makes a business relevant in today's age, is interesting to me. It's like saying that we don't have hours in the day to do mentoring.
Welcome to the Archispeak podcast, the podcast for architects by architects, where we discuss all things about architecture. I'm Neil Pan. Each episode, Evan Troxel, Cormac Phelan, and me invite you in on the conversation as we talk about everything in the profession, both the good and the bad. Maybe you're considering a career in architecture, you're still in school, or you've been around the block more times than you'd like to admit. Join us in the studio as we gather around the water cooler and talk about this profession we call architecture. It's time for some Archispeak.
I died in South Africa, only outlined my body in Tiffany blue. When I died, I drove right in and swam with the dolphins and Lisa Frank. And you.
Welcome to episode 107 of the Archispeak podcast. I'm Neil Pan.
I'm Evan Troxel.
And I'm Cormac Phelan.
And this episode of Archispeak is sponsored by ARCAT. Check out all the features they offer over at ARCAT.com. And starting us off this week, Cormac has a guest to introduce.
So we'll get into it a little bit later about what the topic is today. But just a little hint, we're going to be talking about millennials. So we wanted to bring on our perennial millennial, Lora Teagarden.
Great to be here, guys. Thanks for having me on. I'm not so certain, I guess, by certain definitions, I fall into the millennial category, but I'm on the older cusp.
Yeah, you might be. Welcome to the show, and we wanted to maybe have you explain a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you're doing.
So I am a young architect out of Indianapolis, Indiana. Born and raised, moved around the country after grad school and wound my way back here. I work at Ratio Architects in downtown Indy, which is where our headquarters is, but we have four other locations. But I also own my own business, L Squared Design, and that's where kind of the AREsketches falls under that umbrella.
Awesome.
And what is that?
Yeah.
For those that don't know.
Yes, that is a visual study guide. It started out as sketches, but it's turned into so far 2 published visual study guides, and there's a weekly newsletter associated with it. But it's all of the content, the written content for the ARE turned into sketch form. So paragraph at a time, the content is turned into something visual to hopefully help people recall the information better.
I had a friend who had failed PPP a couple times and passed along your book to him, and he passed it.
That's awesome. I love hearing that.
Yeah, that's cool. And volume 2 just came out, right? Or is it out officially?
It is officially out.
Awesome.
And I just got the first batch of books two days ago from the publisher. So the first round of pre-orders are going out today.
And this is about which one?
This covers SPD, site planning and design.
Awesome. Hold on, I'm going on Amazon right now.
It's cheaper through me, Cormac.
Okay.
Little hint there.
All right. We'll talk after the show.
Okay. The publishing side of that could be a whole different conversation of how Amazon runs its fee structure, but I basically cut out all of Amazon's marketing fees, so it's cheaper to buy it through me.
Yeah.
Hey, Neil, real quick, I don't mean to cut Laura off, but you and I are slacking. We're sitting here in the midst of 2 published authors, and you and I are like, let's just go yell at people on our lawns. Let them take over the world.
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
Sorry, Laura, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's been fun. It's definitely something that takes a lot of time, but it's been worth it because I hear stories like what you said, Cormac, about your coworker, or I have people email me thanking me for the sketches, even like in the midst of another book, just simply enjoying the content that goes out in the newsletter.
And I think it's really nice to have just an alternative way to study. I mean, this is something that is new to the study guide arena.
Yeah, it's I hate to even consider the comparison because he's so much better at sketching than me, but it's like the chain of the ARE study information.
Yeah, it's all visual.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, we're honored to have you on the podcast finally. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've wanted to have you on several times over the last few years, and I think this is finally like a great way to get you actually in here, and then perfect timing with the release of your new book.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, gosh, we met, 2.5 years ago online, and then Chicago or Atlanta at National
Definitely
Convention.
Atlanta.
Yeah, I know it was definitely Atlanta. I don't think you guys came to Chicago.
We did not.
Yeah.
No, I wish we would have gone to that one.
That one was good. The convention location was kind of far away from the nightlife stuff.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's kind of crappy. Because that was the great thing about Philly is that it was right in the heart of everything.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm somewhat skeptical about with Orlando. It all depends on if they're doing the big convention center that's kind of on the outskirts, or if they're going to do one of the little small centers. They've got a couple of different places in kind of, which is still a little bit from like the town, the city core. So I'm a little worried about it, but I know
we did have a listener write into the show who's on the planning activity committee for that show, and they did say that there are tons and tons of tours that are being scheduled. So it sounds like they're really trying to quell those.
Yeah, and that's great because Orlando usually goes down. When everybody thinks about Florida and they think about Orlando, they only think about Disney and Universal, but they don't really think about the fact that Orlando's got some pretty cool things going on.
Well, you're the Florida guy. I don't know. I've never been there.
I grew up an hour and a half away from it.
It seems like they've done at least a handful of write-ups on the convention page about cool places to eat downtown and like historic walking tours in the downtown area or art-based.
And Winter Park is one of the suburbs of Orlando, and it's fantastic. It's a beautiful little town. So I think people aren't going to be disappointed. And if they are, then they can just hop on a bus and go to Disney.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and if they are, they can make it up because next year is in New York.
Oh, you're not supposed to say that. They've got to make the big announcement.
I think they kind of did, didn't they?
It's in New York? Awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely going to that one.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
Yeah.
Hey, well, speaking of spoilers, let's move on to the Millennial Question. So Cormac, you sent us this video. Why don't you give us a little synopsis about what it is or why you sent it?
A friend of mine had posted online, Simon Sinek's. He's a cultural anthropologist, but by education, but he's a public speaker, specifically on leadership. And one of the things in some of his many talks, he was asked the question by many different corporate leaders about the Millennial Question. And at the time, because I read a couple of and watched a couple of videos and read a couple of articles specifically about, he was like, well, what do you mean by the Millennial Question? And they had posed the things, and it's in this video that we're going to put in our show notes, and we do encourage everybody to watch it because it's pretty amazing. They're like, well, they're tough to manage, they're entitled, self-interested, self-involved, blah, blah, blah. So he didn't have an answer at the time. And so he really pondered it. He looked into the research. He really did a very good job of like pulling in all of the background information and then basically formulated an answer. So it got a lot of traction, the Millennial Question, about what do you do about the Millennial Question? Because so many times older generations, just, typical throughout time, they say, what are we going to do with these damn kids? They're lazy. They don't do anything, blah, blah, blah. And so now we're dealing with it in the form of the millennials. A lot of times they get a bad rap that they are lazy or they are entitled or they, really are tough to manage. And I think it's because we're growing up in a changing time where, we are technology based. And so we aren't, we're kind of like caught behind. And I say we as just speaking for an older generation that really, I'm not really a part of that generation. I'm kind of in the middle between, millennial and baby boomers, the Gen Xers, which kind of really do kind of straddle that in both their embrace of technology, but also kind of have a foot in, how things were done. And so, he formulated this question or formulated the answer to the question. And we wanted to get Lora, who is a little bit younger, but more specifically, we wanted her because she's really involved with the rising stars of architecture and the architectural profession, emerging professionals. And we really wanted to kind of have her take on why architecture, why the youth and specifically in architecture for our conversation, but get a bad rap when we sat here and we listened to all of the great things that Laura's doing. And, there are examples, there's exceptions to the rule, but then there's, these exemplary people who are not just sitting by and watching the profession, pass them by while they complain about, well, they're never letting me get involved, or I can never make a difference, or I can never make an impact. No, they're grabbing it and going. And so that's why we wanted to, that's what we want to talk about. And that's why we brought Lora on board.
Yeah. And I think just to kind of set the stage too, that I think that the main issues that are being presented in this piece all revolve around just the newer generation always speaks a different language than the previous generation or previous generations.
Yeah.
And so it's nothing new. And this is just this version of this issue that's coming up. And to me, it's really coming down to the digital natives versus digital immigrants or the non-digital people at all, right? These are all terms that have been come up with in the last, decade, maybe two at the most, since technology really has started to permeate every piece of our lives. But I think that the video really speaks to what we're now seeing as the potential dangers of that. And so that's where Simon kind of enters the scene and puts the narrative firmly in the camp of, now that we've had time to study this, right, because everybody is just kind of taking it on and living with it every day. And it's kind of like the food pyramid of the past, where the whole FDA is based on, the biggest part of the pyramid is grains. And now they're finding out that grains aren't so good for you. It's kind of like that with technology, right? It's the same thing. So everybody's thrown into it. They're dealing with it every day. There's constant transformation happening. And now they're looking at, since there's been enough time to study this, now they're coming up with some outcomes that are not so favorable. And I think that's really where the foundation of this video is set, because he talks a lot about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, he even mentions in it that there's an aspect of moderation that just it's harder to control with social media, because he compares it to gambling. He compares it to alcohol. Both of those things are fine. They can be fun, but you put too much of yourself. Like too much alcohol can kill you. Too much gambling can get you into some serious trouble. He brings up that moderation piece, which is just from a technology side, it's harder to moderate. And I can't really speak to that because I don't have kids. I know how much I mess with my own phone, so I can't imagine what it's like when you come home from work at the end of the day and you have a kid who is just clinging to your ankle and wanting attention, and that you could just give them this device to take their attention, right?
Well, I shared this story with Neil and Evan once, probably just a couple of weeks ago. We were out to dinner with our family, and we make a conscious effort to make sure that we leave our phones, either we put them in my wife's purse or we leave them in the car, because we want to have a conversation with the family. And so we were at this restaurant, and they had like an indoor seating and outdoor seating. It was in a mall, so kind of like outdoor, but in kind of like the corridor of the mall. And there's this girl walked up, and it was her 18th birthday, and all of her friends, started coming up, and there was 15 of them. Like clockwork, they would come up, they would kind of give her kind of like a little side kiss and do a little selfie, and then sit down, and immediately just start texting or whatever they were doing. So as this party went on, I look out there, and the only person who's really not on their phone is the birthday girl. And so here's this poor 18-year-old girl turning 18. It's this huge moment for her in her life. I mean, 18's a big thing. And all of her friends are on their phones, not talking to her, not engaging with her. And I just thought, I mean, how miserable is that really? Because you're here to celebrate somebody and you're ignoring them.
Yeah.
Just completely baffles me. I wanted to go back real quick because hopefully people, before they start listening to it, where they're going to start listening to it and they'll say, oh, well, they're talking about a video that I need to go back and take a look at. I just wanted to kind of touch on the points, and I sort of did, but I wanted to touch on the points that what is the millennial question? What Simon says in the video is, wow, that's going to really annoy me. Simon says. But it's in the like I said, corporate leadership comes up and they have this confounded thought about the younger generation. And so they basically kind of lay out what confounds them about the younger generation. And I said it a little bit earlier, but I just want to kind of point out, I wrote it down. It's just like that they're tough to manage, that they're entitled, that they're self-interested, self-involved, never satisfied with their job, and lazy.
So those are the negatives.
Right.
But then there's the positives, right? They want to work in a place of purpose. They want to do meaningful work.
They want to make an impact.
Right.
Really, the millennial question isn't, well, here's our impression of them, and it's more negative, and here's their impression of themselves, and it's more of positive. It's really that middle ground of how the generations can come together and really kind of solve how it is that one person can. And because we want the new generation to come in and basically take over for us so we can move on, move up, and then ultimately retire. It's just like you're looking at somebody who's like, I don't really want that person to take over for me because look at them, they're lazy, they're entitled, they're, blah, blah, blah. And then they're just like, I really wish that this dinosaur would retire because he's in the way of me making a place of purpose or making an impact. And so it's that meeting in the middle kind of thing that is the question.
Agreed. Yep.
Hey, Laura, I wanted to jump over and ask you, he talks about failed parenting strategies. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you experienced this growing up, the whole part about participation medals and being always getting the award for something, and that you always have this expectation. Maybe that's one of the reasons why many millennials feel entitled to something, because they've always been given something for no matter what they do, whether they failed at it or not. So what's your perspective as somebody who grew up in that time? Does that make sense to you?
Well, I mean, it's one of those where he also says something about the environment is a huge piece. So the millennials are coming up into this based on their environment through no fault of their own, into these parenting strategies.
Right.
Which, to me, when he immediately said that, I was like, oh, heck, we're going to get a lot of backlash about this, because no fault of their own is basically like they're getting off scot-free, which he goes on to explain, that's not necessarily what he means. He means that people who grew up in the Depression, like my grandfather did, grow up to be very miserly is not a kind word, but he's very smart with his money.
Thrifty.
Yeah. Well, he pays attention, but
Right.
but at the same time, he then had my dad, who is a definite baby boomer. And so my dad grew up based on that parenting strategy of a parent who grew up in the Depression. And growing up, my dad got, I think he would say he would get like 1 or 2 pairs of tennis shoes a year. Mm-hmm. So he has like issues.
But they were Yeezys, right?
I don't know what that is.
$1,500 tennis shoes.
No, definitely not.
They were Bobos.
Secondhand stores, and how can you sew on Lacoste logos onto thrift T-shirts, and so that's what he grew up in. And he talks about people who grew up in the Vietnam and Nixa era grow up to be more cynical because of the experience of their environment. My experience was that being on the older portion of this, like I was, until the word millennial came along, I wouldn't necessarily have associated myself with it. I'm more associated with the generation once older. And I don't know if that's what, like Y or...
Yeah, Gen Y.
Yeah.
Well, no, Gen Y and Millennial are the same, actually.
Oh, so it's
Yeah.
X. So I'm like the tail end of... Because I grew up in households because of my dad's work ethic instilled in him by his dad. School was my job. And if I didn't do good at my job, I was in trouble. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to make sure that you get into honors classes because we think that you're amazing. It's you're going to work your butt off. And part of that might be because he was, before he retired, a higher level math teacher. But at the same time, there were incentives in place. So if I brought home all A's in high school, I got $50 at the end of the semester. Now, if I brought home 4 A's and a B, it immediately dropped down to like $25. And I was not someone who like got paid for chores. Chores were expected. So that was and I wasn't allowed to keep a job because school was my job and sports. And so that was like my main source of money outside of holidays or birthdays.
But when you were in sports, was it that kind of a scenario? I mean, sport, because you're on a team and it's a completely different set of maybe values or whatever from your parents, then was that a different experience? Because that's really where we started to see everybody gets a trophy, right?
You know, I think, so I started playing soccer when I was 5. And my guess is that, you know, at that age, they do give everyone participation medals. Mm-hmm. Even when that was like very new to the system. But I think it's more because like, heck, we kept 5-year-olds from not picking dandelions on the field. Like we want to reward them for something. Yeah. But I actually moved up pretty quickly in soccer and it was much more competitive. So at that level, they don't reward you for being a slacker, you know?
Yeah. Right.
And so perhaps those things, then the lack of them acted as carrots for me. I would say that that's probably a good motivator for myself, but it also helped me set good goals. Like, okay, if I want to reach this, I need to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And when I started high school at Speedway, they didn't have a women's soccer team. So I transitioned from playing, at that time, I think it was like travel A-League or something, to having to play on the men's soccer team. And so, you know, your goals and your benchmarks just jumped really quickly. So I had to work harder to even get field time, let alone some sort of medal at the end of the season. So I'm probably not a,
yeah, you're not a typical.
Well, I think just thinking about how people grow up now versus even then, right now, you know, I have a teenager and he has a cell phone, and if he were on a sports team, which he was in the fall, he had that phone in his pocket all the time. And so if he's on the bus going to another school to play a football game, I'm sure he's on the phone the whole time instead of talking with his buddies. And I think that wasn't the case back then. It is now. And I think even deeper than that, though, is it doesn't matter 100% that kids are growing up with these devices and having them with them at all times, because it's just as effective with adults, right? We all are on our phones all the time, and we see people that we work with on their phones all the time. And so I don't think it matters necessarily whether we grow up with them or not. It's the same addiction can happen no matter what the age is, as far as technology goes. But I think that the things that you're talking about, I guess I don't. Go ahead.
Well, and I want to come back to that when we start getting into like what that looks like in a corporate environment, because there's a difference between being on your phone and screwing around and being on your phone doing work, depending on what your job is, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But in terms of technology, from how it's kind of so quickly embedded itself in our culture. I mean, I was a senior in high school, so, all right, Neil, you're going to feel really old.
That's okay.
He's used to it.
He always does.
I graduated high school in 2004.
Sweet. What? Yeah, you're a millennial. Sorry.
My senior year, I had friends as freshmen, sophomores that had cell phones. I did not get a cell phone until my senior year, when I basically went out and started a plan and said that I was going to pay for it with my summer work money. And my parents said, no, we'll use it to like get in touch with you if you need to. So I guess we'll pay for it. But like I took it on expecting that I would shoulder that responsibility. And at that point, it was like an old flip phone and it didn't cost that much for a plan. The inverse being, my sister, when she started driving, immediately got one. And she was 2 years younger than me. I think my younger brother, who's 7 years younger than me, he got one when he was in junior high because it was, it's easier to get in touch with him when he's riding the bus. And then I think my baby sister, who is 12 years younger than me, got one even younger than him. So it very quickly crept in at younger ages.
And that's interesting how you put that timeline together and you see kind of the evolution of technology. I mean, because we're talking about, this is the 10th anniversary of the iPhone, and that's really when the explosion happened. And you overlay that with your brothers and sisters, and it very much is in line with the change in it's almost of, the digital pacification. People, parents, I do it, rationalize, why my, middle schooler and high schooler have cell phones. And, it's just, it's easier to get in touch with them, as you said, get in touch with them on the bus. Well, how many times did your parents, like email or text you or anything when you were on the bus? Well, never, because one, it didn't exist when I was on the bus as a middle schooler, and they already knew that I was on the bus. I'll be home soon. If I'm not, then I probably missed the bus or something, and they figured it out from there. And so it's interesting to how you overlaid your timeline, because you see how it's all changed, and it's now become, we're all learning this technology. I mean, our generation, the generation beyond us, the generations to come, we're all learning how to deal with this technology as part of our life right now, mostly unsuccessfully, because we've kind of transplanted the technology and the pacification from technology as our social outlet, rather than looking at somebody face to face. I make this. It's interesting because you're very Midwestern in your upbringing, and so am I. I've got Michigander father who grew up, and he was all about the face to face contact, and he was all about looking someone in the eye and really talking to him. And Neil and Evan and I, we joke all the time about me being the Luddite of the group, where I actually make a point to go into the post office and buy stamps and talk to the person and not go to the machine and things like that. I want to have, I go into the bank to have the personal contact and stuff. And we've made it so much easier to detach ourselves. And this is where I think we can kind of lead into, maybe talking about it in the professional environment. But, we've made it so much easier to do the instant gratification of, boom, here's the information, or, hey, Siri, what is, oh crap, Siri's actually turning.
You just did that for everybody who's listening to the podcast who has an iPhone.
Exactly. Mine just popped up on there. I should have left it upstairs. But and it just automatically kind of pops in and tells you what you need to do. And so, I think it's kind of interesting that, we're overlaying this evolution, with the millennials, and, we're all still trying to learn how to deal with it. So I think it may be confounding the leadership, but I think it's because the leadership just doesn't know how to use it.
Well, and I will say, you talked a little bit about like the Luddite form of face-to-face interaction and how technology is kind of taking that away and making people incapable of those conversations, or at least much harder to come by. Yeah. So from a leadership perspective, I can imagine that trying to get younger generations comfortable with client meetings, or how to interact with consultants or reps, or, that from an architecture perspective, if you don't like face-to-face interaction, as a person in general, that makes that step even harder.
Or an owner, right? How do you get clients?
Yeah. How many times do you, when you maybe say to, a junior staff member, it's just like, hey, can you contact your consultant, or can an engineer or something? How many times do you say that and they say, well, I'll go ahead and email them?
Yeah. Well, that's dicey, right? Because some of that is a CYA. I need it in writing.
Now,
exactly.
Yes. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up.
So, obviously, if you have, like, I've had clients before that are wonderful and contractors that are wonderful. And so outside of needing to like email him a sketch while he's in the field, I can have a phone conversation and know that he's not going to, like, he's going to do what we talked about. But, we all know that there are also those contractors or reps or consultants that are very much in the CYA mindset. And so if you don't get it in writing, then they're going to say, well, we never had that conversation.
Right.
So, but yeah, it is a lot easier to email. But I think that also that's where technology helps the inexperienced, right? Because I will tell you right now, like, I still hate calling reps because I'm still learning about specifying stuff. I'm still learning about how details work. I got my license really quickly, which means I don't have the wealth of experience that you do, Cormac. So those are things that I'm still learning, and being able to like compose my thought in an email and do research before I call them. And it's a
kind of levels the
live
playing
interaction.
field, right?
Yeah. So there's positives and negatives.
Well, we're seeing that everywhere too. I mean, that's really what the technology is doing, is leveling the playing field for everybody. So everybody can be a publisher. Everybody can put their work out there. We don't have the big gatekeepers anymore.
Yeah, which has its positives and negatives, right? Because then that also means that you have clients who think that they can Google how to fix something and think they know more than you, right? So
yeah. Well, that's a completely different. Maybe that's the next topic we talk about when we have you on, because that's a completely different conversation about how everybody is now an architect because they're able to Google something and say, well, this is Google says this, and you're like, well, but that's not how it works in practice. But like I said, I don't want to get going on that one.
All right, so let's take a second out of the show to talk about our sponsor, and we all know that is ARCAT, because ARCAT has been a great sponsor of this show. We all are pretty busy, and sometimes we feel like we could use another hand to help out. Would you like someone to draw CAD details for you? Seriously? Would you?
Yes.
Create BIM objects? Write specs?
Yeah.
How would you like all of that for free? That's a serious ask from ARCAT. That is pretty awesome that they're willing to help us do our daily jobs like that. So everybody go over to arcat.com, because ARCAT is the answer, and they have already done all of this work for you. You can search the ARCAT libraries for CAD, BIM, specs, catalogs, videos, and more. And all this content is created for you for free. And you don't even have to register to download this stuff. You can stop registering on sites for content. Just go to ARCAT and find what you need. ARCAT has created the website that is devoted to you, the building professional, to find product information fast and hassle-free. Check out ARCAT today at arcat.com. And don't forget to provide feedback on their website. There is a button on the right side of every page. If you have a suggestion to make ARCAT better, go ahead and click that feedback button and tell them that Archispeak sent you. So thanks, ARCAT, for sponsoring this episode of Archispeak. And let's jump back into the conversation. I would like, maybe we can go down the avenue a little bit further of what Lora started here with. How does this represent itself in the profession of architecture? Because one of the main points of his breakdown in his technology section is that kids aren't creating deep, meaningful relationships at an early age.
Yeah.
And so how does that come up again in the profession, right? Which is what we started to talk about here with the email and things like that. I think that we could go way deeper into that part of it, because when you're talking to clients, we know that the rainmakers in the large offices are people who have personal relationships with clients, and they have for a long time. And so how does that change in the future if those personal relationships are not already in place? Because people don't have personal relationships in person, they've got them via technology. I mean, how do you guys kind of see that playing out?
From what I've seen so far, those people who become, quote unquote rainmakers, the business development people, will continue to be the people that have the personal relationships. Like part of moving up in leadership is that you are bringing in work. You have those connections. Yep.
And you're responsible to do that. I mean, that is a job, that's a bullet point on your responsibilities, right?
Correct. Yeah. So you don't get to those positions without being in your community.
Right.
And living into that, which you should be doing anyways, right?
So what So in the future, is your community online, I guess is my point. Like, will we just adjust to how things are now and continue down this path? Or will an adjustment be made to go more to a personal connection type, which was the previous way to do it? Or is it a mix of both? I don't know.
Well, think about this. Well, I was going to say, think about this, though. We all know each other first from online. Mm-hmm. Now we all know each other face to face. We hang out. We've hung out together on numerous occasions. We get together when we're in, the same towns and we're doing, some of the same events and things like that.
Laura bought us donuts. Yes.
Laura bought us donuts. I mean, we've created those meaningful relationships that started on social media, but then took it into the realm of, let's call it the physical reality of things. And so that is where you're going to see there will be people who are going to be more comfortable just kind of hiding behind the screen. And then there are going to be those people, the business development, the rainmakers, that are going to be able to bridge the gap between the digital social media world and physical environment of shaking people's hands and networking and getting out there. I mean, Laura, you're doing that's kind of, again, one of the reasons why we wanted to have you on here and talk about that, because you are bridging the gap between the old timers and the way things used to be and kind of like embracing all of the new technology, but understanding that you're able to push past all of that and make more meaningful relationships.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know if, so after grad school, at that point, Facebook had been around for, at least in the Midwest, Facebook had been popular for like 5 years. And I was in a position then where I was moving around the country. So I was able to use those social technologies to keep in touch with people. And as we continued to move, like that was my way to maintain meaningful relationships, whereas the inverse now is that young people start at the social level and are having a hard time getting back to the meaningful relationship, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think something that maybe we could talk a little bit about too is just, I think like Laura, I see a value in using that network to bring more value to my firm. And so because, I'm a digital immigrant, I didn't grow up with these things in my hands all the time. I mean, it was a long, slow transition. I fully embrace it, and everybody in my office knows that I fully embrace it. And if I want to be the person because now the way that you find out information is through the Google, right? So if you Google my name, I want to be in control of what comes up. And I definitely don't want to be the person where nothing comes up. But there's a lot of people in our offices who have been there for a long time where nothing comes up. And so that to me is like obsolescence in the future, right? Or now. And so I'm using that as a tool to bring value to my office. I mean, Neil, you have 100,000 followers on LinkedIn. And I don't know if you use that tool to bring value to your office, but you definitely could, right? That this is one of those things where there is some value to this community that you've been a part of and helped build over the years digitally.
Yeah, well, and I mean, from a leadership attracting and trying to retain young professionals, you better believe that's what they're looking for when they interview with you.
Absolutely.
They need to see a digital footprint, because you're right. Like, if you aren't in the webosphere, are you obsolete? Like, are you still, what does that speak to in technology in the office? Like, are you still using line drawing CAD? Are you still drafting and blueprinting by hand? Like, if you're not keeping up with certain pieces of technology, what does it say about the rest of the ideas behind your business?
Yeah. And if you really are a piece of that business, you are representing it. So if no one's doing that, then I think that you've got a problem.
Well, and the expectations of clients are changing as well. I mean, now, they do want, much like everybody else, they do want the instantaneous answer, the quick fix of like, are they listening to me? Are they paying attention? Do they have, my best interest in mind? And so they're expecting something. And if you're a firm who can't deliver that, you're not going to be their firm much longer. So you have to be able to kind of keep pace with the expectations that your clients have.
Yeah.
And so to me, like getting back to the millennial question, I think these are all questions that, or I guess issues that firms are dealing with. And to me, the people who are going to be able to answer these questions are the millennials. They're the ones who are going to be able to bring the firms into the next era. And I think the main issue here is there's a lot of problems with what millennials want to do. They want to do meaningful work. How do you start in a corporate environment doing meaningful work from the get-go? Right? Because what do they have to offer the firm? It's a completely different set of skills than what they ultimately want to be doing, right? If they're good at technology, but they don't want to be relegated to just doing that kind of work. Like, they want to do meaningful work.
Oh,
Photoshop. So how does this work?
Yeah. It's like Photoshop, let me throw you into doing...
You're the graphic secretary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your question leads into, another point that he brought up. And so before I bring up the point, I think that mentorship, early on is a huge key factor to being able to not only understand the new generation, but also be able to embrace them and use that understanding as a way to shape and change the way the firm works, not just kind of on a selfish realm of being able to maintain and retain employees, but also being able to capture, new work and new clients.
Well, I think this is probably something that Laura's really good at. I mean, it's pretty obvious that she is, and maybe you can speak to this, Laura, but I think that the people who are going to usher the profession of architecture into its next iteration are the ones who understand that we both need each other. And so you've got the millennials who are coming into the offices who have to have respect for the people who have been there, to teach them what it takes to run a profitable profession or a practice. And then you've got the establishment who needs to respect the millennials and what they bring to the table. And it's got to be give and take. It's got to be both ways. But I think both, speaking in generalities, both eras of people have this chip on their shoulder.
Right.
And that is not allowing them to have that mutual respect.
Yeah.
So that leads into one of his points that he brought up about impatience and how if you're coming in with this mutual respect that you're talking about, Evan, they also need to understand that, as he kind of brings up, you're not going to change the world in 8 months, because you need to learn to navigate the waters. You need to at least have the time to stop and appreciate what's come before you, and understand and utilize that experience, utilize those tools that are there. That, a lot of times architecture isn't reinventing the wheel, but the business of architecture is. So
it's constantly changing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it has to.
Exactly.
Again, I would say this is another point that people have to understand, and people firmly entrenched in their beliefs of the past are not going to. is that if things aren't changing, then your business is not long for this world, right? You have to be current, if not trying to stay ahead of the curve. And how are you going to do that? You have to embrace it. You have to constantly be looking for that thing that is coming. And that, to me, is what the millennial generation offers.
Exactly.
Well, and the ability to embrace that just shows good leadership in general, right?
That's true. Yeah, because the job of leadership is to find the replacement. I think you talked a little bit about that earlier, Cormac. And if you're firmly entrenched in this is how things need to be and this is how they need to stay and this is how, I need to protect my position because if I can't protect it, then I don't feel safe.
Right.
Then if you're not constantly looking for how to raise up those people that are coming in, then you are not being a leader.
Mm-hmm. So the instant gratification piece, I just want to say before we get into that, like this actual portion of the talk that you're linking to in the show notes was part of a hour plus long talk that he had with those people, and the entire talk is worth listening to. Like you don't necessarily need to watch it, but just play it in the background like a podcast.
Right.
Because he talks a lot about the difference between what a leader is and what a person of rank is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where that leadership embracing versus rank showing authority kind of comes into play. So it's just, that's worth listening to. But the instant gratification piece is definitely something that millennials deal with a lot because they're used to technology continually getting faster. So why isn't their life?
Yeah.
I don't know how outside of experience to get younger generations to understand that it doesn't work that way. I myself am very impatient. Like my family will tell you that. My friends will tell you that. But what I've learned to do is to set better goals and turn it back on me and figure out how I can improve or if there's something I can do to speed it up, not expect other people to do something for me.
Can you give an example of what you're talking about?
Well, I mean, my work within the AIA as a whole. So I'm now, as of January 1, 2017, I am the AIA Indianapolis secretary. I didn't join the AIA until not even 3 years ago, like officially joined the AIA.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just immediately started going to meetings and trying to be helpful. And when I saw stuff that I didn't like or I felt like stuff wasn't happening, I volunteered my time instead of sat and complained about it and said, why aren't we moving faster?
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't we doing X, Y, or Z? I gave my time to make sure that we could do X, Y, or Z. So I don't know if that's like that's like the first example that I can think of. There's obviously other professional examples, but
that goes back to, kind of the comment that was made about finding, making a place of purpose. So rather than, you sitting back and just letting the profession happen to you, you were like, well, I see things that are right, things that are wrong. And you decided to push forward. You decided to get involved and actually be a part of it. And a lot of times the impatience factor of things, I don't necessarily think that is impatience. That is looking for the purpose, looking for the impact. Whereas, the impatience is, oh God, I can't believe that, I've got to sit here and surf through this. Why can't I just do a web search and whatever first thing pops up, that's what I'm going to do. And not really going through the time of understanding whether or not that's right or wrong for your project or your client or what you're doing at that point. And so you're somewhat disconnecting yourself from the experience of learning from the past or doing the research and things like that to really kind of do it. You're trying to find the quick fix. You're trying to get from point A to point B as fast as possible and not really paying attention to the route. Mm-hmm. And you are, on the other hand, especially with getting involved with the AIA, are looking at the route and understanding that the route may be long. Sure, it's only been 3 years since you kind of dug into AIA and really kind of get involved with them, But you're looking at, I understand what my end goal is. My end goal is to just make the profession better. And I'm going to jump on the ride and take the route, whatever it is, and just play it by ear as it comes. So I don't necessarily know if that's sorry, I don't think that was a good example of impatience, because you are accepting of the ride.
Yeah. Well, so when I joined Ratio in June, almost 2 years, June of 2015, we had a handful of social media channels active. Our website was good. Like, it had won a national award, I think. Our marketing team did. But there were other pieces that, from my background of like interacting with you guys and seeing what social networks could do for yourself and a company, there were other pieces that I was hopeful that we could embrace. And our digital marketing manager is actually, I think, like 2 years younger than me at the firm, which is funny. But he's fantastic at what he does, but there's only one of him. So when I joined Ratio, he and I started having lots of conversations about, well, why aren't we doing this? And I was constantly like hitting my head against the glass wall of, okay, so what's keeping us from doing this? And really what it was time, but I was still being very impatient with it. It's time and resources. And so I'm sure he got annoyed with me, because I would constantly be sending him articles of, look, we can be doing this better. Like, have we considered this? Can we do this? This is what is showing as working well right now. This is what the new trends appear to be. Can we start integrating this? And full well realizing that, he is one person and I'm technically not allowed, like, I don't have billable hours set aside to be able to help him. But I wanted to be there to help him in any way I could. So I just kept sending him resources and hoping that at some point, like, something would stick to the wall. And so because of that impatience and because of that persistence at the review time of restructuring who helps with what, like, I now have 8 hours a week to take on the social stuff. So I'm lightening his load by taking some of it on myself because I was impatient about it. But at the same time, there's now like the top down impatience of, okay, so what's the return on this? So I had to go into it and kind of steady their expectations of how quickly they would see a return in value. Because when you get started in some of this stuff, like, you guys know this, it takes 18 months, 2 years for a brand's name to be recognizable online, at least from any substantial way. So
who wants the instant gratification there?
Yeah, exactly. But so I guess in some ways the instant gratification can definitely be a hindrance because it makes you impatient. And if you don't push at it well, you just come off as an impatient young jerk who always wants more.
I think it's funny that the things that you're talking about there are just how business is done nowadays. And those are relics of the past, where when you say, I don't have billable hours in the day to do that kind of work, to do the kind of work that makes a business relevant in today's age, is interesting to me. It's like saying that we don't have hours in the day to do mentoring.
Right. Exactly.
Just replace those two things. I mean, it's so interesting that the development of our marketing strategy, the development of our people are not things that are billable. They're looked at as outsider type of things because they're not billable, is how I guess I should say that. And because everything is based on getting more efficient with our time and making more of a financial impact in the firm. And so to me, that's all about short-term gains. And nobody's looking at that as far as like, what the long-term effects of those things are. And that, to me, is extremely frustrating. And those are relics of the past, and they're not, they're firmly entrenched, I guess I should say, because there's a lot of firms that operate like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and Simon even mentions it in the discussion that a lot of corporate locations look at those short-term gains versus the long-term impact of investing in the employee.
Yeah.
And that's the disconnect between younger generations and leadership or people of management.
Maybe we can wrap up and just talk a little bit about the kind of outcome of, and to me, this was an unexpected outcome of his talk, because I initially, when I started watching it, I thought it was just kind of a presentation of the problem, but he clearly laid out kind of the path of why the problem exists and then things that can be done about it. But to me, the big aha moment of the video was when he says we have a complete lack in corporate leadership of how to deal with this. We don't know how to deal with the kids. We don't know how to help them overcome the needs of instant gratification. And so what he says is basically you have this complete lack of corporate leadership, and the truth of the matter is that it is on them to work extra hard to teach kids how to connect. And so
Right.
like we talked a little bit earlier about having this mutual respect, but what he's really saying is, and because you can already hear the older era of people saying, well, yeah, it's on them to approach me and ask me to mentor them. Actually, it's not. It's on you to show your leadership and help make this happen so that the transition can be as smooth as possible, and work extra hard to make that happen.
Yeah.
And I think that was unexpected. I think that I didn't think he was going to go there, and I was actually pleasantly surprised that he did, because this is the outlook that I have. I mean, I have to build the bridge, is how I look at it.
Yeah.
And to me, that is a quality of leadership. It is inconvenient. Leadership is inconvenient, and you have to do the hard work to make it happen.
Yep. The primary responsibility of leaders is to build other leaders.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's a classic graphic of what leadership is, and I'll look it up and see if I can find it for the show notes. But it basically what because we've talked previously about the difference between leadership and management, but most people think leadership is the leader being carried by all the people in a chair as they point in the direction that they want to go. And the true diagram of leadership is the leader in the front pulling everybody along, doing the work, right? That's basically what it's showing. It's doing the work of pulling everybody on a sled behind them and saying, we're going to go this direction, and I'm going to do the work to get us, to lead us there. And it's not me pointing, saying, take me there. It's me pulling. And I've always liked that graphic as a diagram of what leadership could and should be.
Yeah, it's definitely on leaders, but I don't want to take the responsibility off of the young generation either.
Yeah, mutual. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Because as much as they can lead you, if you are, digging your heels into the ground and expecting them to carry you on that sled, then you're not going to, your career is not going to go anywhere either.
Right.
So.
Yeah, the biggest thing I always say every time, I'm in a position of mentoring is remember, you make your own career. You're the one who guides it. You're the one who directs it. You have people out there that are helping you to be able to guide you, use their experience, use their knowledge, but you're the one who shapes your career.
Yeah, they're not going to do it for you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. All right. Well, that was a kind of a period at the end of the sentence there, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Laura, very much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I feel like this is a conversation that could just continue to go on. But
yeah,
it can. It certainly can, and hopefully will. Hopefully people listening to the show join us online, either on Facebook or on Twitter, and keep the conversation going. Tell us what you guys think leadership is. Tell us, your experience with the Millennial Question.
Yeah,
we'd
definitely
really like to hear it.
So Laura, where can people find out more about you and what you're up to and your new volume 2 of AREsketches, all that stuff? Where do you want to send people?
So Twitter and Instagram are both L2, like numeral 2 Design LLC. And you can follow me there. The sketches get posted there. But the actual books are for sale at my website, which is www.l-2-design.com. And that's obviously where all the blog stuff happens and all that kind of fun stuff. And through Architalks, we've done, some mentorship posts and stuff like that, which obviously starts to get into the Millennial Question too. But yeah, those are the main sources. There's Facebook as well, but you can find pretty much all of those connections either from Twitter or the website.
Thanks again very much for being on the show. We really appreciate it, and we hope to have you back again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
So before we go, we'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, ARCAT. Make sure you check out everything that they offer, all the specs, all the details, and everything that you can sign up for free, as Evan mentioned earlier, at arcat.com. That's ARCAT.com. And we really thank them for their continued support of Archispeak. And for all the catalog of episodes, please visit our website at archispeakpodcast.com. There you can sign up for our newsletter that will include links to all the different things and including the videos that we talked about in this episode. And then between the episodes, please let us know what you think by joining that conversation and continuing it over on Twitter or on Facebook. All the links for those can be found, again, at the main site, archispeakpodcast.com. And we thank everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time.
You have to walk it, you can start now, or you can hang your head in despair. It's the only road will take you there. They may tell you that you'll never recover, baby. I've learned one thing or another about you. It's the only road will get you there. And if they don't know how to treat a lady, maybe you can teach them how to act. They could use a little bit of discipline and a hand on the backside, baby. Let's pretend we're doing the right thing. And while we're at it, have the opposite day. Some like to hug, some leave a bruise, some need to go. I'm ready for you. On once again, hey, on. I see too much, it escapes on. Great on the real world. It manufactures glory for the feeling its fractures. Photos and truth like a tractor, a cracked actor, a mother of pearl. And if they don't know how to hold a woman, maybe you can put them back in their place. They could use a little bit of discipline and a hand across their face. Baby, let's pretend we're doing the right thing. And while we're at it, have the opposite day. Some like to hug, some leave a bruise, and stop mixed up.